Hello YouTubers and fellow RVers, well, and fellow hams. Well, of late I've had a lot of people asking me about what antennas I use in the RV via comments, emails, and Facebook and other places. And I thought, well, you know, there's probably a lot of people new to the channel that haven't been following along, and they don't really know about my antenna experiments or haven't yet discovered them or what I'm using. And so I thought that I would just go ahead and do a video and talk about my RV antenna farm, my portable antenna farm. Presently, I have 4 antennas up. I'm parked out here in the desert, a fairly remote area, lots of room. And I have 3 antennas for HF and 1 antenna for 2 meters. And I can sit here and turn the radios on, and I can operate on just about any band from 160 meters up through 2 meters. 440, I can kind of do. The Slim Jim works fairly well on several of the 440 frequencies. I just don't spend a lot of time up there. But yeah, I can sit here and just turn a radio on and operate on just about any of the bands in an RV in the middle of the desert. So I thought that I would go ahead and show you my antennas. Now, a quick note. I'm still going to get slammed in the comments from some people, I'm sure. But most of these antennas were experimental builds. So I kind of threw them together. I didn't polish them, shine them. I didn't build nice enclosures for the balance and so on and so forth. They were just put together as a test, as an experiment. And I'm still using them because they work really well. And I just haven't bothered to rebuild them yet. Whenever the test rig fails, I'll rebuild that particular antenna more properly, but don't expect to see pretty nice, shiny, polished builds here. These were experiments, and they work well enough that I'm still using them as they are. So let's go outside and let's take a look at my antenna farm. Hi guys, I'm outside. Here's the RV. Here's the antenna farm. So I have, as I said, 4 antennas. Let's start with 2 meters. That is my 2 meter Slim Jim. Now it clips onto the side of the RV with these little broom handle clips. Now you can get these at a hardware store. You'd use them to clip a broom up on the wall. The PVC pipe clips into there, fits perfectly. The Slim Jim then sits on a piece of PVC up above it, and it connects over into a feed through. I don't know if you can see that in the shot there next to the window. A feed through that comes out of the wall next to the desk. When I park, it takes me all of about 5 minutes to pull out the ladder, go up there and slap that on the side of the rig, hook it up, and I'm on the air on 2 meters. So Slim Jim, it's a great antenna for 2. Performance is excellent. It even almost kept up with my friend James's diamond collinear vertical that he has up on a mast. So an excellent antenna for 2 meters. I'll put the video link on the video I did on the Slim Jim down below. In fact, most of these antennas I'm going to talk about, I'll put the links to the videos if I can find them easily enough in the description down below. But you can always search my channel for the name of the antenna and probably find the videos. So that's my 2 meter solution. Next, my quick and dirty go-to HF antenna for when I'm parked briefly someplace and I just want to get on the air or do some shortwave listening. The Chameleon whip with a 9-to-1 un-un. Up there on my ladder, I have a piece of 3-inch PVC. Now I use that occasionally to I just drop the MFJ mast into it if I want to pull a wire antenna up and I don't have any supports around. But also at the top, I made a little metal bracket that you can just see there, and the Chameleon whip is connected to that bracket. Now, at the top of that bracket, there's a little copper wire snaking down to that box. That box is a weatherproof box that contains a 9-to-1 un-un with connections on top of the box and also an SO239 on the bottom. There are 2 coax runs to that box that go back to my desk, so I can switch between those 2 feed points at the desk. The Chameleon whip with the CH mill extension is a total of, I think, around 17 feet tall, but it gets me on just about anything from 7 megahertz on up through 6 meters. It works fairly well on 40 meters, but it really works well on 20 meters and then up in frequency. The 9-to-1 uses the coax as a counterpoise, but I also have a counterpoise wire running along the top edge of the roof that you can't see there that is connected to that 9-to-1. So that antenna, if I'm just parking in an RV park or something and I just want to get on the air, do some shortwave listening, I can put that up in about 5 to 10 minutes. Again, I just get the ladder out, go up there, and I put the antenna on the bracket and screw on the nut, and I'm on the air. So that's my quick and dirty HF antenna. Connected to the bottom of the box, you can see a weird little thing and some window line. That's my doublet antenna, and that is my favorite HF antenna. But it's a little more involved to set up. It takes a bit of work. Let me show you the doublet. Now you can see the window line coming from the RV over, and it's going to come to a mast. I'll show you in a moment. This piece of PVC that you see here in the middle is just anchored to the ground, and that's just there to reduce the motion in the window line. We get a lot of wind out here in the desert, and that wind can really whip things around. So that reduces that motion tremendously and helps to protect things. What we're seeing here is the base of the MGS Max Gain Systems mast. Now I have a fence post that I drive into the ground, and you can see that cleared area there at the base. What I do is I dig down about a foot with my shovel, then I pound the fence post in, and then I put the dirt and sand back in and pour in some water, put more dirt and sand in, pour in some more water, pack it down and put in more sand and pour in more water. I call it desert cement. That fence post would probably hold the mast on its own without guy wires. It's that strong. Coming up the mast, we see one of these quick release clamps. It's a telescoping fiber mast, and it has these quick release clamps that you can just flip up and then telescope it in or out and then clamp it down again. That makes putting this mast up a very quick and easy project. And way up here at the top, I don't even know if I can get the camera to go up that high. I've got the mast guide in 3 directions, and at the very top is the doublet. There is the doublet up at the top of the mast, about 30 feet off the ground. It's my favorite wire dipole antenna by far. It's not a resonant antenna. You do need to use a tuner, but it covers, well, in my case, 80 meters through 6 meters really well and performs really well on all of them. At each end of the antenna, I have another piece of PVC that's anchored in the ground, and the springiness of the PVC keeps tension on the antenna wires. And here you can see that I just use a rock as the anchor to hold the PVC connected to the center there. Then the end springs and the wire runs up to the mast. So I duplicated that at the far end down there, and that is how I hold up the wires for the doublet. And I guess I should mention it. Like I say, these were experimental builds, so they're not polished. But hanging at the end of the window line there at the box, you can see the 4-to-1 un that I wound that I use for the doublet. And it's, well, I don't know what to say about it. It's a 4-to-1. It's wire wound. I think I'm using 16 gauge wire on it, so it wouldn't handle high power. But for my use, I rarely get above 30 watts. It seems to work just fine. And the reason for the 4-to-1 is to bring the impedances of the doublet down closer to 50 ohms to give the transmatch or antenna tuner less work to do to make the match and reduce the loss in the antenna tuner. That's probably a debatable thing. I don't know. Some people say that you can feed a doublet directly with a 1-to-1 current ballon. And you could, but you would have a greater mismatch perhaps, and perhaps not. It's really a gray area. There's many different ways you could do it. This just happens to be the way that I do it, and it works just fine. My final antenna is an end-fed half-wave wire for 160 meters. The length of the wire is, well, 1/2 wave at 1.9 megahertz, however you want to calculate that. This is a 49-to-1 match, the design popularized by Steve Ellington, which is coated in silicone to keep the water out. Because like I say, as I said, and I'll repeat again, these were experimental builds. That's why this is so ugly. Whenever this finally fails, I'll rebuild it properly in a nice enclosure and keep using it. So the anchor is a ground rod, and I could only drive it in about 2 feet here before I hit rocks. Everywhere I went, I could only drive it in about 2 feet until I hit something solid. But I do have this connected via a wire to the rig, to the RV. Grounding is something else people ask me about out here. Out here in the desert, you really don't have much of a ground. This is sandy soil. There's just not much conductivity to the soil. So it's really not lightning protection, but it does give a path for charges, static charges picked up by the wires in the wind, to bleed off into the ground instead of building up. And I have noticed that with at least this minimal ground connected to the RV, the antennas are quieter. I don't get crackling and popping on the antennas as much as I get, in the receiver, crackling and popping as much as I get without it. So I'm using it also as an anchor for my end-fed wire, which goes up to the mast. So our wire goes up to the mast, just above the guy wires there, and it goes down across, and I have my MFJ mast over here that's supporting the middle of the wire, and then it goes way across this wash to a tree back there, and then beyond that tree over another wash a little ways. It's quite long, about 270 feet or so. So that's the toughest one to put up out here. But that does work really well, gets me on 160 meters. I use it on 80 meters all the way up through 20 meters. It works really well. And I've also used it to receive AM broadcast as well as do shortwave listening on. So that's my 4th antenna. And between those 4 antennas, I've got pretty much everything covered. Another thing that people ask me about often in the comments and social media is what the noise is like out here in the desert. A lot of people are in urban areas surrounded by houses and noise sources, and they're used to having a noise floor, of S3, S5, even S8 or 9 of just noise from local sources. Well, the noise floor out here in the desert, it's non-existent. S0. So little noise that it can actually kind of sound like there's not even an antenna connected when I first turn the radio on. In fact, I've had that thought cross my mind. I've turned the radio on and thought, oh, is one of my antennas down? And then a signal comes blasting through. So let's point the camera at one of the radios here, and I'll show you what the noise floor is like here in the desert. Okay, I'm on 20 meters. Presently I'm on the 160 meter end-fed half wave. And as you can see, S0. Now I have there we go. So IPO is off, which means that the preamp is on. So we actually have a little bit of a preamplification going on the RF too. You can hear some static crashes. There are some storms across the country, but as you can see and hear, real quiet. Well, maybe the band's dead. Nope. Let's see.
Nice ratings to you and blessings are 73-99 north. Oh, thank you. This morning I had a noise level about S9. I don't know where it came from, but anyway, it died down about 11:15, so I was kind of happy with that.
That's on the end fed. Let's go to the doublet.
Lovely, but I did copy him on the SDR.
About the same on the doublet. And then on the Chameleon vertical. Maybe he's a little bit stronger on the vertical. It changes. It depends on, takeoff angle, skip distance, and all that. So it's nice having a choice of antennas to flip through. And even on the vertical, you can see there's still no noise. And that's similar on all the bands. Let's go down to 40 meters. Okay, there's a quiet spot. That's the vertical. Oh. That's the doublet. That's the end fed. Again, almost zero noise.
What he said for radio, I think he said a 7300. But I did a little, well, whatever he's got is working really well. I did a little.
There's the vertical.
7100 yesterday.
The doublet. Now I haven't tuned the doublet. You really have to tune a doublet because it's not a resonant antenna. So let me go ahead and tune it. Drop my power down. You never want to tune an antenna tuner with your power up. You can hurt your finals doing that. Okay, now we're tuned. Got a few static crashes, but still no noise floor. Booming signals. If I tune to a quiet area, that's zero noise floor. Just a few static crashes. So that's what the noise floor is like in the desert. It's non-existent. It's absolutely quiet out here. It's an ideal place for playing radio. So there you go. I hope that answers the questions about what I'm using for antennas, full timing in an RV. Now obviously, for a person that's full timing in an RV and spends all their time in RV parks and resorts, these are not useful antennas. You need room. But for those of you that like to boondock, as they call it, boondocking merely means off-grid. It means going out into the wilderness off-grid in your RV. For those folks where you have a little room and some options and maybe even trees to play with, there's different, well, there you go. These are the kinds of antennas that you could utilize. Now obviously the max gain systems mast that I use is great out here in the desert, but if you're in a wooded area, you wouldn't need it. You've got trees probably right around your RV that you can throw wires up into. So there's that. But anyhow, that's my antenna farm. The places I go, I'm usually at for a month and a half at a time before I move. So nothing has to be permanent, but it does have to hold up to wind and such, you know. And this is the solution that I have that works for me. And it works great. I've been able to operate just wonderfully out here in the desert and enjoy it. All right, so that's that. I guess we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Also, if you're not already a subscriber, click to subscribe. Join us on the Facebook channel for discussion about the videos. And if you'd like to help support this channel, please click to support me on my Patreon page.